As a northern girl, and a Chinese girl for that matter, pie mash and liquor isn't something that resonates with me. But almost 20 years ago, I moved down south and fell in love with a southern boy. And one thing this boy grew up eating was this East End delicacy of pie mash and liquor, which in the past 20 years I have tried many times before. But unfortunately, it's not for me. I'm not talking about your average puff pastry, steak and ale you can buy in Tesco. A classic East End pie is beef encased in a suet pastry, and it has to be a certain shape. Now, making this for the first time, I feel like the pressure's on. I know it's not going to taste exactly like walking into a Robin's, which was one of my other half's favourites. Now we live in Surrey. They're few and far between. So I browned off some onions, some beef mince, seasoned, then added in some Worcester sauce, a bit of Maggie's, a tablespoon of flour, followed by some beef stock. Leave it to simmer for 20 minutes until it thickens. You want it thick, you don't want it saucy. Then onto the pastry. For 2 pies, I used 200 grams of plain flour, 100 grams of suet, half a teaspoon of baking powder, and 100 mils of cold water. Give it a good knead. Don't overwork it though. Then cut round your individual pie tin. A classic one's a bit more rectangular than this, but these were all I could find. Press your pastry into the tin, remove the excess edges. The base layer has to be a bit thicker than the top. I'd say about double the thickness. So into the nice thick bottom goes in your cooled off mince. And I must stress, this has to be cold. Not even warm, it has to be cool. Then once your filling's in, give it a pat down, then roll out your top pastry. This should be a lot thinner than your base, about 1 millimetre thick. Put it on top and almost stretch it over the pie. Press down the edges and chop off any excess. Now if you're watching this and thinking this looks bland, then that's exactly what I'm going for. If you haven't had a proper pie and mash, it's meant to be very simple and affordable type of dish from back in the day. A hearty working man's type of meal. And it's amazing it's carried on through the generations and brings so much nostalgia to so many people. So once I fork down the edges, you have to poke a couple of holes in the top to let the steam out. Stick it in the oven on 200 for 10 minutes. Then turn it down to 180 for an extra 20 minutes. Now while that's cooking, I'm going to work on my mash. I boiled these at the beginning and I just add a bit of butter and a bit of milk. The traditional one isn't a luxurious creamy type of mash. It was made very simply and cheaply, so I didn't want to fuss too much with the mash. Next, on to probably the most important part, the liquor. Start off by making a brew. Melt some butter and stir in some flour. Then we're going to slowly pour in a very light mix of fish stock and chicken stock. You don't want this to taste too strong. It's not meant to have an overpowering flavour. Traditionally, they would use eel stock, but obviously I don't have any of that. Then throw in a very large handful of chopped parsley. It should be very finely chopped. Mine wasn't, so I gave it a bit of a whiz. Checked it was the right consistency. Shouldn't be too thick, shouldn't be too thin. Now it's time to plate up. If I had an ice cream scoop, I would have used that for the mash. Then I flipped over the pie and it came out perfect. Again, we're not going for the shiny egg wash, luxurious puff pastry type of look. An authentic one should look pale and matte. Now to pour on the liquor. And in my opinion, the most important part, you need to cover it in lashings of vinegar, chili vinegar if you have it, and tons of white pepper. I don't know why they do this, but they do. And it really goes. And now to be judged by the other half. He said it was gorgeous, very close replica, and enjoyed every mouthful.